The camera is not something a lot of people are thinking about while they're playing a game, even though it is probably one of the most important elements, because otherwise your game would look like this. And camera angles can make or break a game. Let's look at one of the most popular early 3D games to see how they implemented a new camera angle. Mario 64 probably has the coolest example of how they implemented a 3D environment. Most people don't even realize that in this game, you're not even really playing as Mario. You're playing as this Lakitu, following Mario around. Throughout the entire game, you are essentially the cameraman. Also, because 3D is a new environment, they actually have to explain how to look around in a 3D environment, which is not something you think about nowadays, you just know how to do. Now, it is worth mentioning that you had to use this abomination to look around. Now, there are some people out there that say this is their favorite video game controller of all time, and if you're saying that, then you're wrong.
The girl from Ipanema goes walking and
First-person games. You know, the games you hand the controller to your dad and he goes, "How do I look around and move at the same time?" The first-person camera is probably the camera most people are familiar with. That's because this is the point of view you live your everyday life with. This is probably what you're seeing right now. You're probably in a war zone planting a bear trap. And because this is a first-person point of view, there's not a whole lot to talk about with this. I mean, it's typically used in shooter games because that's how you can get the best experience from a shooter. Although there are some exceptions, such as Gears of War, and of course, I don't want to mention its name, but Fortnite.
Oh my god, it's Rick from Fortnite.
Down one.
It's Rick from Fortnite?
Down.
Although I did want to give some credit to Mirror's Edge here. This is a first-person platformer, which you don't see a lot. It's about parkouring through buildings. It's super cool, and if you haven't seen it, you should totally check it out.
when she passes, each one she passes goes.
The 2D camera is best imagined as if you were following a drawing on a piece of paper. The camera often sticks to the player and follows them kind of smoothly throughout the level. Almost all 2D games use the same camera. It's just this sort of follow around the player and hover above them or hover next to them and just get a general sense of the world around you as well as the player either in the center or a little bit off to the left or right.
When she walks, she's like a samba.
Now, after me going through the 3 basic cameras, let me show you some games with terrible cameras. I think it's best just to show you the raw footage of this first game. So this is Bubsy 3D, a platformer that gives you a top-down angle every single time you move. No, I'm not joking. This is what it does every single time you move. They expect you to play through this. Look, the obvious reason this doesn't work is because you can't tell where you're jumping, and there's no sense of depth because it's a top-down angle. Now, this next game, Resident Evil 1, isn't necessarily a bad game. I actually really enjoyed playing this game when I was little. But this game definitely suffers nowadays in terms of camera. This game has a dynamic camera, so every time you enter a new room or a new section, the camera angle will just jump to the next one. And while this isn't necessarily a bad idea, the problem is you don't know when the camera's gonna jump, which can really hinder you in a chase. Now, this mess of shapes you're looking at on screen is in fact actually a game. It's a fighting game for the SNES called 3D Balls. Once again, not joking. This fighting game is awful, and it's mainly because the camera constantly moves every single time the characters moves. And while the camera is just one of the reasons this game is terrible, it can really be distracting, especially in a 3D environment game.
Another down speed. He's so low in the bottom.
Rick from Morty!
That's it.